Thank you for joining. That is very, very helpful. It's nice to have someone to speak to, and so that I'm not speaking to myself. And today's topic, I'm going to run through the stop smoking. It applies to stopping other habits and also to curing anxiety, but it's going to be focused at specifically stopping smoking because I've got 3 people in the last couple of days that have needed that help. And I want to be able to point them just to a video instead of spending a half hour solving it directly. That way they can tackle things as they want to. So I'm going to share the screen and just talk to the topic of solving the underlying challenges of stopping smoking and then supporting it with nutritional and herbal support. The smoking, tobacco, nicotine addiction, which I didn't put on here, but that really is a vaping thing also in today's world. And that's, I don't know what percentage, but I know a lot of people that are going, got this nicotine addiction I can't do anything about. And of course, the first step is willpower. I can, I will. But then many of them, the ones I talked to this week, had all stopped dozens of times, and then something stressful will happen, and then it's back again, and all the guilt, the shame, the wondering if they're ever going to make it through. Those kinds of challenges are there again. So we want to solve the underlying challenge. And I want to start with the story from way back in 1996, when my next door neighbor at that time, we were talking over the back fence one day, but he came to me over the back fence. We were talking about gardening and other things we were both interested in. And he said, Fred, I got a favor to ask. I know that you're believing in God's help, and would you please pray with me and the friends that I'm asking while I try to stop smoking? I've tried multiple times before and I've never been successful. And I said, absolutely. I believe prayer works. I believe God's help. He answers our prayers. I'd be happy to pray with you. And would you like to explore the other support, the herbal help that can help with that? And he said, sure. And so we set a time and we sat down and just looked at the herbal support to stop smoking. And then as he told his story, he said he started smoking when he had a back injury, a shrapnel injury from military stuff. And of course, calms the brain, has some other areas there that it makes a difference. And that was 15 years ago. And unfortunately, the shrapnel injury left him with a paralyzed left leg, roughly 80% paralyzed. And so for 15 years, he'd been on antidepressants, he'd been on sleep medication, he'd been on a ton of different things that weren't making any difference, and he could not stop smoking. I'm going, oh, wait a minute, shrapnel injury, antidepressants, neurological. And the smoking is often a calming of the neurological system. In addition to the shrapnel injury 15 years prior, he'd also had a car accident a little over 2 years before, and it had partially paralyzed his left arm, so he couldn't lift it any higher than just barely shoulder height. He couldn't use his whole hand. He was missing the use of the outside fingers on his hand, and it had paralyzed or blocked nerve function into that left arm. So he had left leg blocked, left arm blocked, and hadn't ever been able to find a solution to that. Well, knowing that it was all neurological, we outlined a nerve rebuild process with him. And let's jump forward a week. At the end of the first week, he had taken the herbal list, got it, and made the following changes. He, without any urging from me or even knowledge of me had stopped taking all the medications that hadn't been working. And so that is not something we typically suggest, because some of those, especially antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, can have some pretty dramatic effects on the neurological system if you stop them all at once. But he had stopped all medications, all sleep medications, everything else. He'd started in with an herbal calcium supplement, relaxes, a couple of herbal nerve rebuilders. And at the end of the first week, we talked again, and he had use of his left arm completely. In fact, I drove up home from work. He was out in his driveway. He said, "Fred, look." And he waves his left hand at me and moves all of his fingers, which he couldn't do before. And he couldn't raise it to full height. I'm going, wow, in 1 week, after 2 years of not being able to use it, you've got back use of that much of your neurological system. And I didn't see him again for another 4 weeks. At the end of the 5th week, again, he was out in his driveway, probably waiting for me to get home, because he greeted me with, "Fred, if I'd seen you," he walked over to me without hardly a limp. "If I'd seen you, I probably would have decked you, because I've been hitting severe pain over and over again all this week until suddenly I have full use of my leg." And the outcome was his body was sending signals down those nerve channels and going, what connects to what? Trying to tone out the nerve signals and figure out how to reconnect. And in that week, it had reconnected everything. And so he showed me he could lift his toe. He could do everything with that leg, even though there was very little muscle capacity, because he hadn't been able to use it for 15 years. He actually could do things that he hadn't been able to do in 15 years. And let me chat while we're on this slide. So he asked for God's help. He asked for friends' help to pray with. He was open to support. When I said, "Hey, do you want the herbal support?" He was open to that. And then he changed his entire habit structure. He took control of all of his food and ate only natural, and cleared out all of the processed foods out of his diet that week. He just said, "You know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do all of it." And he applied the full change. Now, my last bullet point there says he was persistent for months. Well, 5 weeks is barely into it. He did it for a 6th week, stopped, and continued, because the smoking didn't just disappear. He said it took actually about 6 months for the urge for smoking to clear out completely. He didn't tell me when he actually finished smoking or completely quit, but he said it took about 6 months for that to never come back, to never feel it again, while he was taking some of the herbs that we'll outline here in a minute. So that persistence was really a piece of it. And God's help is absolutely a critical piece. So we want to find the underlying causes and identify them. And in every case I've talked to so far, every single one of my clients, every friend, it's been an anxiety issue, where anxiety has put them back to smoking again after they quit, or anxiety is the push back to it. The calming the emotional, find the stressors, solve them. Most people, and everyone that I've known, have some emotional ties to it, either while they're with friends, or while they're at the bar, or while they're playing the guitar, or while there's something tied to it that calms them down or creates a joyful, and it's got the smoking, the cigarette is in the middle of that. It's part of that process. So finding the stressors and solving them, I have seen a huge change in forgiveness. Just taking those emotional causes and forgiving an ex-husband or an ex-wife, or forgiving abuse by another. And then taking that same concept, forgiveness and gratitude, or lack of judgment and forgiveness, and then expressing gratitude to God for the learning opportunities that were gained during those times of stress. So letting go of the emotions by recognizing what we've learned in them has made a huge, huge difference. And then identifying the physical causes and solving them. And in many, many cases, especially with anxiety and also with a craving for that nicotine, there's a physical cause, and lack of microminerals, lack of other nutrients, and an out of balance in acid alkaline balance are the three most common causes that I've seen. We are not going to spend a lot of time on the acid alkaline balance. That's a whole different presentation. I've posted that online in multiple places. But the lack of microminerals, I do want to spend just a moment on, and then talk specifically to some of the herbs that calm and rebuild the lungs, the nervous system, so forth, so that we can identify some of the ways to support that. And this is finding this precise method, so we need muscle testing to find those. Anxiety, support for recovery. I've got a picture here of a kava kava root. I love kava kava as a support for anxiety. It does so much to make a difference in supporting that anxiety. So instead of reaching for a cigarette, we can have the calmness there. Or instead of reaching for any other addiction, the calmness is supported with kava kava. I've listed here alfalfa, kelp, nettle, sea salt. I'm going to talk to that on the next slide a little deeper. And then let's take the things out of the diet that create an out of balance or a rise and then a crash. In other words, clear all the processed sugars out of the diet for two reasons. Because processed sugars don't have the broad spectrum microminerals in them. And that's why when we use any sweetener, a honey that has microminerals in it, another sweetener like stevia that's a whole plant sweetener. And what I found with sweeteners is I could get rid of that sweet tooth. I don't have to taste the sweetness. I can savor the other flavors that are there, and it really made a difference. By getting rid of the sweet tooth and just basically abandoning it for months, it's made a difference in letting the rest of the body systems recover. And then I'm not drawn to the sweet taste, which in most cases has all of the minerals taken out of it. All the processed sugars have taken out the microminerals, and then in many cases they've bleached it, so they've added insult to injury in those cases. So micromineral sources, let's talk to alfalfa for just a moment, and the same with the others. Alfalfa, that one plant drops its roots down 25 to 30 feet and pulls up microminerals that are not available on the top of the ground in many, many areas anymore because of the amount of chemicals that have been sprayed on the ground, which are acid chemicals, which bind to the alkaline minerals and wash them out into the ocean. And so we've got polluted ocean waters, but we've also got lack of microminerals in the top of the ground. And beautifully, kelp goes down there. Alfalfa goes down there and brings those up, and it's part of its natural benefit is that it's got all those microminerals in there. And when we're looking for what micromineral source works for my body, muscle testing is the best way to find precisely what works for us. Kelp, let's mention kelp for just a moment. Kelp is the seaweed with tons of microminerals. It also has iodine, which protects the thyroid. And in many, many cases in today's world, the thyroid has been under attack and has lost its resiliency. And just by supplementing with the broad microminerals plus the iodine that's there, the thyroid is able to start rebuilding, and then our energy restores, and the weight loss or the balance of hormones starts benefiting there. Nettle, another one with high microminerals. Didn't list it here because it's not available broadly, but watercress is another one with high microminerals. And then just eating a rainbow of fresh foods and changing that on a daily basis to restore the gut microbiome makes a huge difference on how fast the microminerals can be reabsorbed. And then sea salt, instead of the bleached and processed salts. And my favorite sea salt is Redmond real salt because it comes from an ancient seabed that is not polluted, whereas some of the currently harvested sea salts are actually coming from polluted sources. So restore the microminerals. That's a critical one. I should mention here, herbs can help, and we're going to cover a number of herbs on the next 5 or 7 or whatever slides. There is not scientific proof on all these herbs. Many of them have good scientific studies, though. And I read a number of those studies. And then we can muscle test and see which ones help each individual specifically. So let's look at some of the herbs. First, alternatives to smoking. Herbs that'll relax, ease tension, and break the habit. We mentioned kava kava first. That's one of the ones that I didn't list again here. Damiana is relaxing and a mood balancer. Passion flower is also a relaxing herb. It also changes the craving for nicotine. Mugwort was once called the sailor's tobacco. It's used for relaxation and to cleanse the liver. And California poppy is relaxing for the nerves also. Herbs that rebuild the lungs, the liver, and the nervous system. Mullein. Now, I've got whole 20-page documents on mullein. Rebuilding the lungs is only one of the properties of mullein. It relieves pain. It is an antibiotic, antiviral, antifungal. That as a tea, mullein helps rebuild the lungs and clear the mucus out of the lungs. And as coltsfoot and lobelia also have some of those same properties. And so muscle testing, seeing what is going to be effective for an individual is the critical piece here. Elecampane is also good for the lungs. So some really powerful ones there for rebuilding the lungs. Dandelion root, as well as artichoke and milk thistle, are all herbal cleanses for the liver and can help the liver recover from long-term tobacco use or long-term non-tobacco use in the current vaping, and because they help the liver to restore back to full function. Simple oats, but do that in whole form because oats, once they've been rolled or flour, convert to sugar very quickly. Skullcap, and I probably should have spent a whole slide on skullcap. It is so calming, so rebuilding for the nerves. And we know St. John's wort is a nerve tonic and helpful to rebalance and calm the nerves also. There are a number of other nerve rebuilders. I'll mention Dr. Christopher's Relaxes and have that on a later slide. So if we're looking for something that's already in combination and been proven over many, many years, Dr. Christopher's Relaxes combination is very, very powerful also. Here's some interesting single or very simple ones. You know, it looks like hopefully the very bottom line there is visible. Not on my screen, it's got something on top of it. But peppermint tea is a wonderful one for nicotine withdrawal symptoms. And it helps to boost circulation, clear the lungs, and improves the breathing. We can use peppermint oil externally to ease the nerves and calm the breathing. Peppermint tea would be my primary choice. Get it on the inside, but breathe in that tea as we're steeping it. Very, very powerful. And then peppermint oils externally are fine. Don't overdo the oil. Slippery elm. 3 specific properties of slippery elm, medicinal properties. Highly nutritive, a wonderful nutritional herb. Calms all of the digestive system and provides a home for the friendly bacteria. So slippery elm there helps to let the body recover, restore, as the friendly bacteria is absorbing more and more nutrients. And it says on the slide here, you can take it as an infusion. That's a tea, a capsule. I prefer it with just putting a little bit of slippery elm powder into a milk or a plant milk, maybe a little bit of chocolate, cocoa powder in with it, whatever. Make it so that it works. I've had mothers put that in gravy so that they could slip in slippery elm nutrition for their children. But very, very powerful. More herbs. Marshmallow as capsules or as a powder. It helps calm down the nicotine cravings. It actually coats everything and just calms the body. And you can start with quite a bit and then cut it back after a week or two of effectiveness. St. John's wort, it has a ton of different health benefits. And helping fight nicotine addiction, it can help with the cravings and the anxiety that comes from the reduction of nicotine in the system as you cut back. A lot of people have found success in stopping smoking cold turkey. They just says, I made a date, I set a date, I prayed about it, and then I just stopped. Well, that is powerful. But it also takes quite a bit of work to do it that way. And so just being able to help that out and clear it from the body with St. John's wort. These, a question popped up. These herbs are also helpful for other addictions, sugar addictions, those kinds of things, because they calm down the system. And then the micro minerals is a specific help in sugar addiction. The other thing I should have put on the slides and forgot about it, but that reminded me, taking vinegar, apple cider vinegar with the mother in it, in other words, raw apple cider vinegar, calms down the sugar addictions because it rebalances the acid alkaline balance. And that's a key one in all addictions, whether that be drug, alcohol, smoking, sugar, whatever addictions that is, getting the acid alkaline balance balanced. And that's in my acid alkaline balance presentation, that taking apple cider vinegar, and then I do a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and a tablespoon of molasses in warm water, stir it up, and those two together balance the acid alkaline and help with any addiction recovery. So thank you for the question. That's helpful. A few other herbs, ginseng, and I think American ginseng and also European ginseng both work on this one. It helps helps to prevent the release of dopamine to the brain, which is induced by the nicotine. And this aids in no longer connecting the nicotine to the dopamine release and making the tobacco pleasure go away. So that's very helpful. Valerian, which is in several of the combinations, like relaxes or whatever, can reduce the anxiety and stress. And it says here, don't take it for more than 8 weeks. That is true if we're taking high doses. And the 6 days on, 1 day off, 6 weeks of taking things, taking a week off still applies to this process. We'll find faster balance on clearing addictions if we do that 6 days on, 1 day off, 6 weeks of that process, a whole week off of the herbal supplements. A couple of last ones. Passion flower blocks the same receptors for the nicotine in the brain. I'm sorry, it doesn't block them. Passion flower actually provides the materials that bring the same receptors to the brain for happiness as nicotine does. So it's kind of a replacement. Lobelia, same thing. Lobelia, Dr. Christopher's Smoke Out formula has lobelia as its primary ingredient. And because the other ingredient, lobelia tincture may do the same thing by itself. I want to talk to one specifically, and that's licorice. Licorice sticks, in this case, tackle the hand-to-mouth habit with smoking. And it's also got a couple of other benefits. Unlike nicotine, it doesn't increase the heart rate, increase the blood pressure, those kinds of things. It does say here, don't use more than 6 weeks, and the standard check with your doctor if you're taking prescription medications. But licorice is an expectorant. It helps the lungs clear that out, and it calms down the irritation as a demulcent. So it'll soothe the irritation in the lungs and is often used for asthma, bronchitis, and other respiratory ailments. The other thing I love about licorice is it's an adrenal tonic. It supports the adrenals and can help balance that cortisol, reduces fatigue, reduces the anxiety, increases the energy. I found also that for the adrenals, often the pancreas is worn out. If the adrenals are worn out, pancreas is worn out. And Dr. Christopher's pancreas formula is helpful there. A couple of timeline things that is available across the internet in multiple places, but let's take a look at it here. So within the first 20 minutes, the blood pressure and the heart rate lower. Within the first 2 hours, the nicotine is basically eliminated from active body modification, and the heart rate and blood pressure continue to decrease. Within the first 12 hours, carbon monoxide in the blood decreases. So we start seeing balance here even within the first day. After 2 to 3 weeks, all the way up to the 3-month point, circulation improves and lung function increases. Now, if we're taking the herbs to support it also, we can actually shorten this time down by half or more. And so we don't have to wait 10 years to get all this benefit. We can actually get it within just the first 6 months, typically. After a year, the heart disease risk drops to half. After 5 years, the risk of stroke drops to the same level as non-smokers. And 10 years, the risk of lung cancer decreases by half. With the herbs, we can actually get back to 100% on the lungs and the cardiovascular system. So just recognizing, I've seen that happen. It may take a year or more, but it definitely doesn't take 10 years. Mentioned lung rebuild with a few combinations. Mullein is part of the lung and bronchial formula. Mullein alone makes a huge difference. And lung and bronchial formula is powerful. That's Dr. Christopher's Lung and Bronchial. And then Dr. Christopher's Relaxes for the nerves, which has, as you notice, lobelia in it. It's got valerian in it, and skullcap. 3 of those that were mentioned before for calming and rebuilding the nerves specifically to help with this. That is my last slide. And I'm excited to support people that are trying to stop addictions.
Thank you for listening clear through this about how you can stop smoking and other habits, addictions. You've heard me mention multiple times that self-muscle testing puts you in charge of your own life. To learn more about self-muscle testing and to learn it for yourself, go to the Wholesome Life, thewholesomelife.info/courses, and it'll give you a little bit more overview and link you to a very inexpensive course that has tons of extra content in it. Thanks again.